The black SUV glided to a stop outside the sleek glass building on Sunset Boulevard, its tinted windows reflecting the California sun like armor. Inside, Meghan Markle adjusted her silk blouse one final time, checking her reflection in her phone's camera. Every detail had been considered: the cream-colored cashmere that photographed beautifully, the delicate gold jewelry that caught the light just so, the hair that fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. "Remember," Lydia Grant said from the passenger seat, her manicured fingers scrolling through her tablet, "stay warm, stay relatable, but keep it dignified. The talking points we discussed: motherhood, authenticity, your charitable work. Nothing about the royal family beyond the basic gratitude narrative."
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Meghan nodded, her public smile already sliding into place like a familiar mask. She'd done this dance countless times before, the careful choreography of media appearances, each word weighted and measured for maximum impact while appearing effortless. Outside, photographers had already gathered, their cameras clicking like hungry insects as her security detail opened the door. The Los Angeles air hit her face, warm and promising, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the building's landscaping. This was her city, her element. Here, she wasn't a former royal or a duchess, she was a celebrity, and celebrities knew how to work a room. "Meghan! Over here!" the photographers called out, and she obliged with practiced grace, pausing at just the right angle to let the sunlight illuminate her face. The building behind her was all clean lines and modern sophistication, the kind of backdrop that screamed success and relevance. Inside the lobby, the producer, Samantha Ortiz, waited with a warm smile and a clipboard clutched against her chest. Sam had been in radio for 15 years, had managed temperamental hosts and difficult guests, but something about today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension she couldn't quite place. "Miss Markle, such a pleasure," Sam said, extending her hand. "I'm Sam. We spoke on the phone. Jordan is just finishing up some prep work upstairs." As they walked toward the elevators, passing walls lined with gold records and framed magazine covers featuring the podcast network's biggest stars, Meghan felt the familiar pre-interview flutter in her stomach. Not nervousness, exactly, but anticipation. This was her chance to reset the narrative, to show the world the version of herself she wanted them to see: thoughtful, grounded, authentically human. 3 floors up, in Studio B, Jordan Hale was doing his own kind of preparation. Unlike Meghan's careful grooming ritual, his approach was more like a boxer preparing for a fight. He sat behind the curved mahogany desk, running his fingers through his deliberately tousled hair, reviewing the questions he'd prepared, not the softball ones he'd sent to Meghan's team, but the real ones, the ones that would cut through the practiced responses and force something genuine to emerge. In the small audience seating area, Marcus Reed was bouncing his leg with excitement. The college sophomore had entered a contest on a whim, never expecting to win tickets to a live podcast recording. He'd watched Meghan's journey from actress to duchess to whatever she was now with the detached fascination of his generation, not old enough to remember her acting career, but fully aware of every headline, every controversy, every carefully staged photograph that had marked her public life. Marcus pulled out his phone to text his roommate. "About to watch Meghan Markle get interviewed live. This is either going to be super boring or completely insane." He had no idea how prophetic that message would prove to be. Down in the green room, Lydia was making final adjustments to the plan. She'd orchestrated hundreds of these appearances, knew exactly how to position her clients for maximum sympathy and minimum controversy. The key was controlled vulnerability, enough emotion to seem human, but nothing so raw it couldn't be managed. "The host seems reasonable," she murmured to Meghan, though she'd never actually met Jordan Hale. "His people assured us this would be a positive platform. He's interested in your story as a mother and advocate." Meghan sipped her green tea, the warmth soothing her throat for the conversation ahead. She'd rehearsed her anecdotes, practiced the subtle catch in her voice when she talked about her children, perfected the balance between confidence and humility that made audiences lean in rather than pull away. As they prepared to head upstairs, neither woman noticed Jordan's assistant printing out a different set of questions, the real ones, the ones that would turn what was supposed to be a career rehabilitation into something else entirely. The studio lights created a warm, intimate atmosphere, despite the high-tech surroundings. Soft jazz played in the background as the sound engineer made final adjustments, and Meghan settled into the plush leather chair across from Jordan's desk. The setup was designed to feel like an upscale living room conversation, all warm wood tones and carefully positioned plants that suggested both success and approachability. "We're live in 60 seconds, Sam announced from the control room, her voice crackling through the speakers. In the small audience area, Marcus pulled out his phone to record some behind-the-scenes content for his social media, capturing the final moments before what everyone expected to be a routine celebrity interview. Jordan adjusted his headphones and leaned back in his chair, projecting the easy confidence that had made him a favorite among publicists, at least until they realized his charm was often a setup for something sharper. "Ready for this?" he asked Meghan, with a smile that seemed genuine enough. "Always," she replied, her own smile perfectly calibrated. She'd positioned herself at just the right angle to catch the key light, her hands folded elegantly in her lap, every inch the picture of composed sophistication. The red recording light flickered on, and Jordan's voice shifted into his professional radio tone. Warm, engaging, the kind of voice that made you feel like you were being let in on an intimate conversation. "Welcome back to Unfiltered. I'm Jordan Hale, and I'm here today with someone who needs no introduction, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, actress, advocate, mother, and someone who's been at the center of more headlines than perhaps anyone in recent memory. Meghan, thanks for being here." "Thank you for having me, Jordan. It's wonderful to be here."
She paused, allowing a small, wistful smile to cross her face. "I actually write them emails every night, capturing little moments from our day together. Things they might not remember, but that I want them to have. The way Archie laughs when he's being silly, or how Lily reaches up for hugs. I hope someday they'll read those emails and understand how much joy they brought to every single day." In the audience, Marcus felt his phone buzz with notifications. His friends were already commenting on his Instagram story, a mix of eye-roll emojis and hard-eyes reactions that perfectly captured the divided opinion Meghan seemed to inspire wherever she went. Jordan nodded thoughtfully, his expression giving nothing away. "That's beautiful, and it must be challenging to maintain that sense of normalcy when you're living such a public life. Do you ever feel like you're performing, even in those private moments?" It was a slightly sharper question than expected, but still within the realm of acceptable interview territory. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but there was a microsecond of calculation before she answered. "I think when you've lived in the public eye as long as I have, there's always a part of you that's aware of perception. But with my children, with my family, I try to just be fully present. They deserve the real me, not some version of who I think I should be." "And what does the real you look like? Because I think a lot of people feel like they've seen many different versions of Meghan Markle over the years. The actress, the Duchess, the advocate. Which one is authentic?" The question hung in the air for just a moment too long. In the control room, Sam leaned forward, sensing a shift in energy. This wasn't quite what they'd discussed in the pre-interview. Meghan laughed, but it was her media-trained laugh, polished and controlled. "I think we all evolve, don't we? I'm incredibly grateful for every chapter of my life. My time on Suits taught me about storytelling and connecting with people. My experience with the royal family taught me about service and the weight of responsibility.
Now, as a mother and someone trying to make a difference in the world, I'm focused on using my platform for good." "That's a very diplomatic answer," Jordan observed, his tone still friendly, but with an edge that made Marcus sit up straighter in his seat. "But it doesn't really answer the question, does it? I'm asking about authenticity, about who you are when the cameras aren't rolling and the talking points are put away." Meghan's composure flickered almost imperceptibly. In the control room, Lydia was now gripping her coffee cup tightly, recognizing the subtle signs that the interview was starting to drift off script. "I think I'm someone who cares deeply," Meghan said, her voice taking on a slight defensive quality that she immediately tried to soften. "I care about my family, about making the world better for my children, about using whatever privilege I have to lift others up. If that feels diplomatic, it's because I've learned to be thoughtful about how I express myself." "Thoughtful," Jordan repeated, as if tasting the word. "Or careful." "Is there a difference?" Meghan asked, and for the first time, her smile seemed less certain. The atmosphere in the studio shifted subtly, like the barometric pressure drop before a storm. Jordan leaned forward slightly, his posture changing from relaxed interview mode to something more focused, more predatory. "Well, I think there is a difference," he said, his voice maintaining its conversational tone even as the questions grew sharper. "Being thoughtful suggests authenticity. You're considering your genuine feelings and expressing them carefully. Being careful suggests you're managing a narrative, controlling how you're perceived rather than sharing who you really are." Meghan's hands, which had been folded peacefully in her lap, now gripped each other slightly tighter. "I'm not sure I follow the distinction you're trying to make." "Let me give you an example," Jordan said, reaching for a tablet on his desk. "In your 2019 interview with Tom Bradby, you talked about how difficult it was to put on a brave face when you were struggling internally. You said, quote, 'Not many people have asked if I'm okay.' But then in your 2021 interview with Oprah, you described how you reached out for help and were told it wouldn't be good for the institution. So which is it? Were you not being asked, or were you asking and being refused?" The question landed like a well-placed jab. In the audience, Marcus's eyebrows shot up as he recognized the interviewing technique, the kind of preparation and fact-checking that separated real journalists from celebrity softball pitchers. Meghan's smile wavered, and she took a moment that felt longer than it was before responding. "I think both of those things can be true, Jordan, in different contexts, at different times." "But they contradict each other," Jordan interrupted gently. "In one version, you're passively waiting for someone to check on you. In the other, you're actively seeking help and being denied. I'm not trying to catch you in a lie. I'm trying to understand which version of events actually happened." Lydia's coffee cup hit the control room desk with a sharp clink. This was not the interview they'd agreed to. She reached for her phone, ready to text Meghan an excuse to take a break, but realized it was too late. They were recording live, and any interruption would look exactly like what it was: damage control. "I think you're oversimplifying complex emotional experiences," Meghan said, her voice gaining a slight edge that she immediately tried to soften. "When you're in a difficult situation, especially one as unique as mine was, your feelings and your actions can evolve. What I felt in 2019 and what I experienced over the following years, they're not mutually exclusive." "Fair enough," Jordan acknowledged, "but here's what I'm really curious about, Meghan. Do you think your audience, the people listening right now, the people who follow your story, do you think they're getting the real version of events? Or do you think they're getting the version that serves your current narrative?" The question hit its mark. Meghan's professional composure cracked visibly, a flash of something raw and defensive crossing her face before she could catch it.
"I'm sorry, but that's an incredibly insulting question," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Are you suggesting that I'm lying about my own experiences?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Jordan replied calmly. "I'm asking you directly, because here's the thing, and this is something I struggle with as an interviewer. How do we know when a public figure is being genuine versus when they're performing authenticity? You're incredibly skilled at media appearances. You know how to hit the right emotional notes, how to make people feel connected to you. So when you sit here and tell me about writing emails to your children or talk about your struggles with mental health, how do I know if that's the real Meghan or if that's the Meghan you think will be most sympathetic to my audience?" The studio fell silent except for the barely audible hum of the equipment. Marcus found himself holding his breath, his phone forgotten in his hand as he watched the tension build between the two figures across the room. Meghan stared at Jordan for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was tighter, more controlled, but somehow less composed than it had been all afternoon. "You wouldn't understand what it's like to live under this kind of spotlight, to have every word you say dissected, every emotion you show questioned for its authenticity. You get to sit behind that microphone and ask these questions, but you've never had millions of people analyzing your every move, deciding whether you're worthy of basic human empathy." Jordan nodded, acknowledging her response, but he didn't back down. "You're absolutely right. I haven't experienced that level of scrutiny, but you have for years now. And in that time, you've given dozens of interviews, written op-eds, produced a Netflix series, started a podcast of your own. You've had countless opportunities to control your narrative. So I guess what I'm wondering is, after all that, after all those chances to tell your story your way, why do you think so many people still don't believe you?" When Meghan finally spoke, her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there during the polished opening. "That's not a fair question, Jordan. You're basically asking me to defend myself against the court of public opinion, which is—" She paused, seeming to gather herself. "Which is exactly the kind of impossible position that drove me to speak out in the first place." "But isn't that what this interview is?" Jordan asked, his tone still conversational, but relentless. "Isn't that what every interview you give is? An attempt to influence that court of public opinion, to get them to see you the way you want to be seen?" The crack in Meghan's composure was widening now, visible to everyone in the room. Marcus shifted in his seat, recognizing that he was witnessing something unprecedented. Not the carefully managed celebrity interview he'd expected, but something rawer and more dangerous. "You don't get to define my truth," Meghan said, her voice rising again. "And you certainly don't get to sit there and suggest that my pain, my experiences, my reality is somehow calculated or performed for your entertainment." Jordan leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since the interview began, he smiled. Not as polished media smile, but something more genuine and somehow more unsettling. "But Meghan," he said quietly, "which Meghan are we getting today? The actress or the real person?" The question detonated in the space between them. Meghan's jaw tightened, her media-trained composure fracturing like ice under pressure. She took a deep breath, attempting to recalibrate, to find her way back to the script Lydia had prepared. "I think that's an incredibly reductive way to view another human being," she said, forcing her voice into something resembling calm. "I'm a mother, Jordan. I'm a wife. I'm someone who writes those emails to her children every night because I want them to understand how much they're loved." Jordan didn't let her settle back into comfortable territory. "Do you think your kids will believe those emails when they're older? Or will they read them and think, Mom was performing her love for us too?" The words hit like a slap. In the audience, Marcus audibly sucked in air, his eyes widening as he realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. Not the carefully managed celebrity interview he'd expected, but something rawer and more dangerous.
"You don't get to define my truth," Meghan said, her voice rising again. "And you certainly don't get to sit there and suggest that my pain, my experiences, my reality is somehow calculated or performed for your entertainment." Jordan remained maddeningly calm as Meghan's voice cracked with genuine emotion. "I'm not questioning your love, Meghan. I'm questioning whether anything you share publicly can be trusted as authentic, given how calculated your media appearances have become." "Calculated?" Meghan's voice rose dangerously. "You think having my privacy invaded, my family attacked, my mental health destroyed is some kind of calculated? You think choosing to speak my truth about racism and institutional cruelty is some kind of performance?" "I think," Jordan said deliberately, "that you've built a brand around being victimized. And I think millions of people struggle every day without Netflix deals and million-dollar podcast contracts. So help me understand. Why should your pain matter more than theirs?" The studio atmosphere became electric with tension. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that his casual laughter might be caught on camera. In the control room, Sam frantically gestured for Jordan to pull back, but he remained focused on Meghan's increasingly flustered face. "That is," Meghan began, then stopped, visibly struggling to find words that wouldn't make things worse. "That is absolutely disgusting," Meghan finally exploded, her composure shattering completely. "You're sitting there minimizing my experiences because I found success afterward? You think because I have opportunities now that somehow invalidates what I went through?" Her voice climbed higher, losing all traces of the carefully modulated Duchess tone. "I have no idea what it's like to be silenced, to be told my pain doesn't matter, to watch lies be printed about you while you're legally prevented from defending yourself." "But you're not silenced now, are you? You've had Oprah, Netflix, multiple podcast appearances. You've told your story repeatedly. Yet here you are, still playing the victim." "I am not playing anything," Meghan shouted, her face flushing with fury. "I am a human being who deserves basic respect." Marcus couldn't help himself. A shocked laugh escaped his lips, clearly audible in the stunned silence. The sound seemed to break something inside Meghan, who whipped her head toward the audience section, her eyes blazing with humiliated rage. The moment was captured perfectly by the studio cameras. Meghan stared at Marcus for a beat too long, the reality of her situation hitting her. She was being laughed at, on camera, in front of an audience that would dissect every second of this meltdown. When she turned back to Jordan, something fundamental had shifted in her demeanor. She started, then stopped. The practiced talking points Lydia had drilled into her seemed to have evaporated. "I came here to talk about my charity work, my family." "You came here to rehabilitate your image," Jordan said quietly. "But what if the problem isn't your image, Meghan? What if the problem is that people can sense when someone isn't being genuine?" Meghan's silence stretched uncomfortably long. In the control room, Lydia was scribbling furious notes, already planning damage control strategies. Sam looked between her monitors and the train wreck unfolding in front of her, knowing this would either make or destroy careers. "I don't know what you want from me," Meghan finally whispered, and for the first time her voice sounded utterly defeated rather than defiant. "I want honesty," Jordan said simply. But Meghan was already standing, her chair scraping against the floor with an ugly sound that the studio microphones captured perfectly. "Lydia," she called toward the control room, her voice cracking with something between fury and desperation. "This interview is over." She fumbled with her microphone pack, her hands shaking as she tried to disconnect herself from the equipment that had just broadcast her humiliation live to thousands of listeners. "Turn it off," Meghan demanded. But Sam was paralyzed in the control room, unsure whether stopping the recording would make things better or worse. By the time she reached for the controls, Meghan was already storming toward the exit, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and the kind of raw, unscripted drama that would dominate headlines for weeks. Within minutes, Marcus's phone was buzzing incessantly. His clip of laughing at Meghan's outburst had already been screen recorded by dozens of viewers and was spreading across Twitter like wildfire. Hashtag Meghan Meltdown began trending before she'd even left the building. The reactions were swift and merciless. Late-night talk show hosts immediately began crafting monologue jokes around Jordan's devastating question, "Which Meghan are we getting today?" Memes featuring Marcus's shocked laughter played on loop across social media platforms. Commentary ranged from schadenfreude to genuine concern, but the overwhelming sentiment was that audiences had finally seen behind the carefully constructed facade. News outlets scrambled to analyze every moment. Her trembling hands, the way her voice cracked, the fury in her eyes when she looked at Marcus. By evening, Meghan Markle cancels upcoming appearances following podcast meltdown dominated headlines worldwide. The performance had finally cracked completely. Alone in her Montecito home, Meghan sat in darkness, laptop balanced on her knees, watching the quips replay endlessly. Each viewing revealed new humiliations, the defensive tilt of her chin, the desperate way she'd called for Lydia, the moment her composure had shattered entirely. Her phone buzzed constantly, with calls from Lydia, from Netflix executives, from crisis management specialists. She ignored them all. For the first time in years, Meghan allowed herself to see what others saw, not the victim or the humanitarian or the devoted mother, but a woman so invested in controlling her narrative that she'd forgotten how to simply be human. Maybe they don't believe me, because I don't believe me either, she whispered to the empty room. The admission hung in the air like a confession. The first genuinely unguarded moment she'd allowed herself in longer than she could remember. Outside, cameras still waited at her gates, but inside, finally, dangerously, she was alone with the truth. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it'll take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.